Thanks for listening to the latest Beyond the Back Four podcast, available on YouTube and all podcast platforms. Subscribe now so you don't miss a single episode.
Well, that was very exciting. Welcome to Beyond the Back Four. We are live. You might immediately be thinking, what do you mean you're live? This is a podcast. It's surely just a conversation between the four of you like normal. Yes, but also this time we can't make our usual mistakes and then hide them in an edit, because this is all happening in real time right now. It's live on YouTube, and then this version will go into the various podcast shops that you then plug in and listen to. So everything we get wrong, you'll get to enjoy. It's going to be pretty exciting because we had a great weekend of Premier League football. Spurs left it late at home to Manchester United, but Manchester United managed to leave it even later and rescue a point. Arsenal proved they are mortal after all, drawing away at Sunderland, and there were 3-0 wins for Chelsea and Manchester City. But the teams they beat, vastly different in experience, one being Wolves, the other being Premier League champions Liverpool. So loads for us to talk about. We'll go straight to the biggest story, which is probably Manchester City beating Liverpool 3-0. Graeme, how did they do it?
They were fantastic. I thought the way City lined up, Doku was sensational on that left-hand side, as he has been for much of the season. But, you know, the real genius of this Man City team is, I think it's pretty simple. You get Phil Foden playing with a smile, which lights up Erling Haaland. And when you have Erling Haaland playing well, you know, it's that good. You know, City were really impressive. And I think the big thing with City this season is this formation that Pep has going, this 4-1-4-1. And I think he's going away from the square pegs in round holes. You know, he's not trying to lever someone into a position that they're not comfortable in. And, you know, that midfield just overpowered Liverpool. Liverpool were so poor in many aspects. I thought that Bradley and Gravenberch came away from the game with what little plaudits you could about Liverpool team. But I think they just City overpowered them. And it could and should have been more than the scoreline suggested. And was in the end. I thought City were just incredibly good, and they are real title challengers. They really are. I think Mikel Arteta will have been watching that game thinking, yeah, he's not gonna get over the top of Mikel Arteta about what's going on at Arsenal, because he saw how good Man City were.
So that's some of the positives that surround Manchester City, but what about Liverpool? What's going wrong? Because there was that period of time where they were winning every game really late on, and everyone said like, well, this isn't, you can't consistently do this, but they're doing it now. And then they lost that, they went that massive run of losing, and everyone said, well, yeah, but they won't keep losing. It's just, they just happen to be hitting blips. But this seems more than a blip now, doesn't it? This is consistency, and it's very negative for them.
It is, and it's the formation, and Arne Slot's going to come under a bit of pressure. He really is. He needs to adapt. Clearly, whilst he didn't give Richard Hughes and Michael Edwards et al. A list of get me A, B, C and D, he did give him a list of positions he wanted. And they went out and did it. And so surely he would have expected what was coming. I just think Alexis McAllister in that role in midfield is just, he can't do it. And I think that is detracting from the whole team. I'm not blaming one player, because a lot of that team are not playing well. But when he isn't functioning there, Gravenberch can't take the whole team on his back. And it's just, then the defence are under pressure. The full-backs are not operating well. The front four isn't quite going there. I think it's the formation, and they have to get it right. But they're looking a million miles away. They really do. And yeah, I think they're going for a defender in January. That we know that. I think they need another holding midfielder. I think they need another double pivot next to Gravenberch if they're going to continue pushing these four players up front.
Kieran, if I've learned anything from you on Beyond the Back Four, which I have, and I'm sure you have too, dear listener, so make sure you're subscribed for the next insight that comes our way. What is the big issue for Liverpool if they don't qualify for the Champions League? Because obviously qualification is hugely important to all of these clubs. They currently sit 8th. They're lucky in being 8th. They're still actually only 1 point away from the Champions League spaces. But that doesn't mean they'll get there by the end of the season if they carry on as they are, which is 1 win in their last 6 games, I think.
I think the issue for Liverpool is that they have recruited this summer on the basis and on the belief that they will qualify for the Champions League 5 years out of the last 6, for example. And if that doesn't materialise, what we have seen from the bigger clubs, the clubs who wanted to set up Super League, they have effectively gone to UEFA and they said, we will not get into bed with Real Madrid and try to push for Super League, provided you give us sufficient concessions to make it worth our while. And to be fair to UEFA, that's what they've done. If you use the Swiss model, you've got the benefit of more matches. Secondly, the benefit of higher prices. We are seeing prices for European matches, especially at Champions League level, increase. And you factor that together with the fact that the rights, whilst they've not been resold in all of the markets, they have been resold in quite a few of them. And the increase in the commercial sponsors, getting to the Champions League as opposed to qualifying for the Europa League is worth a minimum of 30 to 35 million pounds, and that's just from qualifying. Then when you look at the step-ups that you get, you're on 2 million euros for a victory, and you've got 8 potential victories just in the group stages. You're getting 400,000 in the Europa. And then as you proceed through the tournament, so a good year in the Champions League, I think we're looking at probably for a club of the calibre of Liverpool, because it's also got a high UEFA coefficient. And for people not familiar with this, again, what UEFA have done is that they've gone to the big clubs and saying, look, if you have a really bad year and you get knocked out, what we're going to do is we're going to give you a bit of extra money from what you've done over the course of the last 5 years. Well, Liverpool have made good progress, and every club in the Champions League is ranked between 1 and 36, and you effectively get 1 million euro for the 36th ranked team to around about 36 million euro for the first. So everything is geared towards protecting those clubs, provided they qualify for the Champions League. Failure to do so for one season for a club of Liverpool's stature wouldn't be an issue, but then it becomes an issue in terms of being able to recruit players next summer because people want to play at the highest level. So yes, it's messy. It's not what they will have budgeted for. At the same time, Liverpool are quite a conservative club in many outlooks, and they will have clauses embedded in player contracts. And I occasionally get to look at contracts because I've got friends, as we all have, in different aspects of the game. And at the elite end, the benefits to the players for Champions League qualification are huge. And for a club like Liverpool, you wouldn't get an extra bean if you qualify for the Europa League or the conference.
I said you'd give us more nuggets, and there they are. Right, happening live. Thank you very much, Kieran. Okay, so we also had a few refereeing decisions that are worth discussing. So we're going to get the view on this one from Mark Clattenburg.
I just want to talk about some major incidents involving refereeing decisions from the last weekend's Premier League matches. I'll leave the most controversial one to the end. So we'll talk about Brentford and Newcastle, why Dango Wahatara didn't receive a penalty kick for a foul by Dan Burn. The referee cautioned the Brentford player for simulation. It certainly wasn't a simulation. And a penalty kick should have been awarded. It's a clear foul by Dan Burn. He makes a clear contact, and the attacker was entitled to go down from that contact. But made it worse was he received a yellow card. The VAR, I think this is the frustration that we have in English football, is that the VAR accepted the referee's decision and said that it wasn't a clear and obvious error, and therefore a penalty kick wasn't awarded, and Dango Wahatara still has and still received the yellow card. And then we have the polar opposite, the same similar situation, but this was in the Manchester City Liverpool match, where Jeremy Doku goes down under contact from the Liverpool goalkeeper. Again, the Liverpool goalkeeper's knee catches Doku, and that contact is consistent with his fall, and therefore the VAR was correct to recommend a review, and for the referee to change his mind, and eventually, after his initial decision to play on, is to award the penalty kick. And people go, where's the difference? And there isn't a difference. Both should have been awarded as penalties, but again, there is an inconsistency with the involvement of the the VARs, and when the line of intervention, the higher bar, the higher threshold bar, and this is what's creating the frustrations, because one is given and one it isn't. And then the major talking point of the weekend was Virgil van Dijk's equalising goal, or thought it was an equalising goal from a corner kick. As the corner comes in, Virgil van Dijk heads the ball to the goal. And what you see from the replays is that Andy Robertson's coming from an offside position, and that offside position had an impact, certainly has an impact because of where he's positioned. He's inside the 6-yard box. He's quite close to the goalkeeper. But what normally, there's 3 elements to the law. One of the elements is he in the line of vision of the goalkeeper? And that certainly isn't part of this, because Donnarumma, the Manchester City goalkeeper, isn't blocked by Andy Robertson. He's blocked by other players. So the offside player isn't blocking the line of vision. So that element of the offside law is taken away. It's this interpretation of impact. Does he impact the goalkeeper's ability to save the ball? And this is the grey area. This is the area where, we've seen goals and goals cancelled, and we're still talking about the offside law, because when you look at Andy Robertson and you look at where he's positioned, he's to the left-hand side of Donnarumma. And I think we all are, we look at football now and the finer details of football and the tactics that are shown and the details that are going. And I believe Andy Robertson was put in there as a tactic, because I believe that they were hoping that Virgil van Dijk would head it in the opposite way. And, nobody would ever say, because it goes in the opposite direction, that nobody would say that Andy Robertson had an impact on Donnarumma and wouldn't be, it was at the opposite side of the goal. The issue we got here is Andy Robertson ducks at the last minute. And that movement of the duck, if ducking under the ball, has an impact. If he was further to the left, and Andy Robertson had an opportunity to move away from that situation, if he'd moved further left, then he wouldn't have been in the eye line of the goalkeeper, certainly. But because he ducks, he certainly had an effect on Donnarumma's ability to save the ball. And therefore, I can understand why the assistant referee give the offside. And once the assistant on-field decision is offside, then the VAR has to have clear evidence that Andy Robertson hasn't had an impact. And there is elements that he has had an impact. I can understand the frustrations around the footballing world. I've heard a lot of football experts saying that it should be a goal. We all want to see great goals, but we also don't want to see his tactics being brought in and players employed to distract the goalkeeper, certainly at set plays, because we all know now set plays are a huge part of Premier League football, especially this season. So the tactics are there. And when you look at Andy Robertson's reaction, it was, when Virgil van Dijk scores, he doesn't throw his arms in the end and he thinks he scores. He looks in that he knows he's in an offside position. But again, this grey area creates a debate, and you'll have the debates in goal, you'll have the debates in offside. And I believe, everybody used to say, if you're offside, you're offside. But we want the game to be more advanced. But while we make the game more advanced, certainly on offsides, it creates this grey area, and it's certainly a grey area, but a one that I would prefer that would be given as an offside.
Okay, you said it creates debate. So if you want to let us know your opinion on this debate, then get in the comments below or email us beyondtheback4@grv.media very quickly, and then we move on to Arsenal. Graeme, do you think that should have been a goal?
No, I don't, actually. I think that the fact that Andy Robertson had to duck out of the way of the ball meant he was in play. He was part of it. I know he wasn't technically in Donnarumma's eyesight, but the fact you've got to duck out the way of the ball means you are in play.
So
for me,
an opposite view?
right decision.
My view is, I'm a Liverpool fan, it's a goal. I'm not a Liverpool fan, it's not a goal. And if the situation was reversed and Liverpool conceded it, if I was a Liverpool fan, it's not a goal, and if I'm an opposite fan, it's one of those where I think the nuances of the offside rule are, ultimately, I think these are one of the ones where you have to leave them to the professionals, and Mark summarised it, as the professionals see it. It's frustrating as a fan to see what looked like a good header be disallowed. But having seen 27 replays, you go, yeah, okay.
Yeah, fair enough. Right, let's talk about Arsenal then. All of a sudden, Graeme, do they find themselves in a title race that maybe they weren't expecting to be in? Because not that long ago, we were talking about Arsenal. Everyone was talking about Arsenal as though it's not a real challenger because Liverpool aren't the team that they were expected to be. And Arsenal had what felt like a healthy lead and their form was incredible. And now Manchester City have just sort of quietly done their work, only 4 points behind, which isn't a great deal for this Manchester City team. Do you think we might see more results like this from Arsenal, or do you think this was just a one-off and Sunderland did their job perfectly?
I'm not sure it's a one-off because I think for me, there's one reason why Arsenal didn't win that game, and it was David Raya. His goalkeeping on that final goal was appalling. There was no need for him to come for that ball. He created that final goal for Sunderland. Brian Brobby, it was a nice finish, but it dropped into his almost David Raya's midriff. By Raya coming for that ball, he's cost Arsenal those points. And I think, I've never been a huge admirer of David Raya. In the fact, I don't think he's world class, and I don't think he ever will be. I think he's a good keeper. He's a good Premier League keeper, but at times he'll never be in the Donnarumma class, which could come back to haunt them. And I think that was the real damning impact on this Arsenal team, who fought their way back into this game. They really dug in here. I thought Zubimendi was excellent. Rice, Eze, I thought was a bit off it, but let's hark back to Leandro Trossard. Arsenal's decision to keep him in the summer was a fantastic one, and he's really paying them back in all sorts of ways. And that goal he scored was tremendous. Mourinho battled hard, and I think we saw how missing Gyökeres was a loss for them. But Sunderland packed it out. Regis Labrie set his team up to contain Arsenal, and they did it brilliantly. And they probably did deserve a point, but I think the main reason Arsenal didn't win that game was their...
Okay. Kieran, from a financial perspective, I suppose you've told us before, winning the Premier League has no great difference financially to coming second for Arsenal. Let me ask you about Sunderland and how their incredible season could result in the windfalls that might come their way, because at the moment they are in fourth.
They've done amazingly well with what I would say a sensible budget, a competitive budget. We've seen a few clubs get promoted to the Premier League and effectively give it an air shot, i.e. they sign half-heartedly a few players. I mean, Luton recruited when they were promoted. They recruited to get relegated. You could argue that Sheffield United have done similar when they've been promoted. The first time that Burnley were promoted about sort of 10, 12 years ago, they said, right, we'll get a squad which we hope will get us up again in 2 seasons, and we'll go again. So we do see these different strategies. But I think what Sunderland have done, which is to be hugely applauded, is that they didn't overspend in the Championship. So therefore they were promoted without any PSR hangover. That's allowed them to spend significant amounts by their standards, but not by Premier League standards. And they've gone down the let's be smart rather than be big route. So they've not gone for any well-known names, with the exception, I would say, of Granit Xhaka, in the sense of bringing players in. And it is going to make a huge difference. If you finish bottom of the Premier League, you'll get around about £110 million in prize money. But then for each place further up the Premier League, you'll get around about 3.5. So you think about it, 16 times 3.5. If they finish 16 places higher, that's an extra £50 million. And then you've got the benefits of European qualification. And I think if we're all honest, we expect Sunderland to go through a rocky patch at some point in the season. That tends to be the case for all the clubs that are promoted, especially when they have a few weeks coming up. I think sort of towards sort of December and January, where you're playing 3 matches in 7 or 8 days, and therefore they won't necessarily have the depth of squad to be able to deal with that. But they have. They've been super smart, and I think they deserve a huge amount of credit. And financially, the rewards that they're looking at present will be unprecedented for a club that's just been promoted.
And I will touch on Graeme talking about David Raya. The goals that Arsenal conceded, the first one from Dan Ballard, was the first goal they've conceded in any competition since they played Newcastle in September, which is like 812 minutes. So a pretty remarkable run they were on. It's been a year since they conceded a goal in the 90 or plus 90th minute that had any impact on the game. So it was a very rare result for them, especially given their recent form. But let's look now to their very heated rivals on the other part of North London, Tottenham. They sort of did it, and then I don't want to say it went Spursy because Spurs fans won't like that, but that's sort of what happened. Manchester United did the very Manchester United thing of managing to win a game, and then it all blew up in their faces, and they still rescued a point. Graeme, who was the big winner in that one?
Manchester United, clearly. The last minute goal was fantastic. It was a really poor game. It really was, and how it ended 2-2, I don't know. United started well, and Mbeumo got his goal, and then Thomas Frank, to be fair to him, made the changes. He got booed when he took Xavi Simons off for Matthias Tell, and he had a fabulous equaliser. But again, Sam, I'm going to blame a goalkeeper here. Vicario should have kept that De Ligt header out. Why is he falling over line? Why not just a 6-foot+ goalkeeper? If you just stood there with your arms up, he's saving that. He's anticipating it and let it go in. It was really poor defending. He'll blame the defenders, but you're an international goalkeeper. You should be stopping that. And so, yeah, he allowed De Ligt to header. De Ligt had a fine game, by the way. Unfortunate deflection off the Tell shot, but I thought he had a fine game. He was worthy of his goal. But yeah, I'm again blaming another North London goalkeeper. Vicario was to blame for Tottenham not winning that game.
Now, normally I aim my questions very specifically to each of you, but this one I'm just opening up to either of you to just sort of chime in as feels appropriate. So we can sort of see Ruben Amorim's structure beginning to work. And United unbeaten in 5. They've won 3 of those games, including away at Anfield for the first time in a decade. But there's obviously still fat in the squad that he wants to trim. There are still players maybe not playing in the right positions for it to work perfectly in the way he wants. So clearly investment is needed, but players like maybe a Joshua Zirkzee, who isn't playing even when United need a forward, and now possibly Benjamin Sesko is injured, are those the kind of players the club will look to get rid of? And Kieran, if there are players like him that have cost money recently, how easy is it to get rid of them and get that money back? Or does cutting their losses not really matter?
I think provided they can get their money back from a PSR perspective. So if you sign a player for 50 million on a 5-year contract, his value for PSR purposes decreases by 10 million a year. So if you sell that player after 2 years and you get 30 million, you've not got an additional PSR loss. So they will be looking for a combination of perhaps shifting some of the former academy players, and they have done very well recently. Greenwood, McTominay, Garnacho. So they're starting to now replicate the model that has been very successful for Chelsea and Manchester City, although perhaps not quite to the same extent as those two clubs. And that will give them the flexibility to move players on. I think the challenge for Manchester United is that Manchester United is a destination club, whereas I think if you are looking at clubs of the caliber of Brentford, Bournemouth, Brighton, they are seen as stepping stone clubs. So therefore, when they're recruited, they know that if they accelerate their career, they'll move on. If they don't, that they will still be earning the going rate of 60 or 70 grand a week, and still be in a relatively fantastic position from an income point of view. What do you do for those players whose ambition it was to join a destination club such as Manchester United, and they are now 22, 23, 24? They're not going to go to a bigger club because they've not managed to prove themselves at Old Trafford, and therefore the only step is down. So trying to persuade those players to take a pay cut, I think, is difficult. And I think that's the bigger issue. And this will be the greater challenge. It's trying to balance a football player's professional desire to be physically playing football versus their sort of cultural desire to want to play for Manchester United. And you've got their agent in the ear saying, you're on an extra 40 or 50 grand a week at Manchester United. Give it another season, son. you might break through because the agent wants their 10% of the higher salary. So it's messy, and that's why it's so important for a club of the calibre of Manchester United to make fewer mistakes in the transfer market. And my observation is that they've got a club. The club record cost of the squad is around about £1.2 billion. And I don't see £1.2 billion worth of value on the pitch, although ultimately that's a footballing topic and rather than a financing one.
So, Graeme, who are the players that are likely to go, we should be looking at thinking they might want to move those on to bring in those sort of positions?
I think that Joshua Zirkzee is a player who has a desire to leave on loan, especially in January. He wants to play football. Long term, I think he would like to stay at Manchester United, but in the short term, he needs to get his place in the Dutch World Cup squad. And Ronald Koeman has warned him that he needs to play. The problem is United are not really looking to let him go. They know there's interest from a host of clubs. Roma particularly are pushing hard for him. They're even preparing to send Evan Ferguson back to Kieran's Brighton to make room for Zirkzee. But at the moment, it's not happening. We've seen the injury to Sesko. We know it's not long term, but United think, well, why should we put ourselves in any sort of trouble by allowing Zirkzee out? There is Kobbie Mainoo, who is desperate to get out, even on loan. But again, United is standing firm. I think Mainoo possibly might be able to get out on loan if United bring in a Conor Gallagher, for instance, maybe on loan from Athletic or something like that. I think he may go, but I don't think we'll see an awful lot of outs from United in January. Altay, the Turkish goalkeeper, might be allowed to go. But yeah, I think United are fairly happy with the size of the squad. I don't think they want to lose too many more, but I think it'll be a different story come the summer. But January, I'm not sure we'll see a massive amounts of ins and outs at United.
Okay, we're running out of time. So quick word on Chelsea. Just sort of quietly doing very well. They're in third. They're on 20 points. They have the occasional slip up, which is maybe why the sort of general perception of them is this is not a finished article team. But actually, at the start of the season, you two were talking about whether or not they could win the league. Maybe not this season, but could this be a Chelsea team? Actually, they're so young that challenges regularly in the future. What do you think, Graeme?
I do. I think I've got confidence in them again. Not to harken about the goalkeepers. I think they're in line to bring Mike Mainoo in from AC Milan next year. I think they'll bring another striker in, and they have currently the best midfield tandem in world football, or equal to anything else in the world, in Enzo and Caicedo. They are looking absolutely sublime. They are made for each other. They know each other's games, and they're just getting better and better. And yeah, they look absolutely fabulous. I think they'll make top four, but I think they always had next season in mind for the title tilt, which I think will come.
Kieran, we've talked a lot about the specific structure of Chelsea and how they balance PSR and their own finances. Do you think that structure will allow them to actually challenge for major honours, or do you think it will limit them when it comes to actually crossing the line and winning things and being the best team?
No, I think Chelsea have got an excellent chance to win big trophies. They've got the financial bonus of winning the Club World Cup this summer. Let's ignore the conference. That they made nothing from the conference. Chelsea have the most expensive squad, not only in English football but in world football. If you take a look at the total investment, and they have gone down that strategy, as Graeme rightly observed, of trying to recruit young players. So putting those on long-term contracts. If the player works out, Chelsea have the benefit of that player not being able to leave on a Bosman until the next decade. Or if the player really insists on leaving, then Chelsea can extract the maximum value. They have the benefit of two things. First of all, that they're in a multi-club model, which allows them to use their other clubs as holding areas or recruit players and take them there. And secondly, whilst it's not a multi-club model, they've also got that sort of feeder club in Brighton that anybody that Tony Bloom finds who's a success knows that they're going to be off to Chelsea in 2 years' time anyway as a maximum, and that's provided them with Caicedo and João Pedro and Cucurella, amongst others. So they should be challenging. If you've got the most expensive squad in world football, and your ambition is fourth, in my view, that's showing a lack of ambition, and I think regardless of your opinions of Todd Boehly and Clearlake as a private equity model approach, that it's likely to deliver success on the pitch as well.
Thank you very much. Right, Graeme, very quickly before we finish, the story has changed since last week's episode, and Wolves are now in the hunt for a different manager, and it looks like Rob Edwards is their man. As a Middlesbrough fan, how do you feel about that? And then secondly, do you believe he can keep them up?
Yeah, it's been a real negative time up here on Teesside. We got word earlier this week that Rob Edwards wanted to go to Wolves. He's going home as he sees it. It's a club he knows well. You know, it's a bitter pill to swallow. We're in second place. We rescued him off the managerial scrap heap in the summer. There wasn't an awful lot of teams looking for him. So, yeah, it's left a bitter taste. I think he's got a real tough task on his hands. He's a good manager. He's a good coach. I think the squad will suit him. He's adaptable. He can play a 3 or a back 4. I think he'll give it a good go, but I think he's got a huge task on his hands. I think with the other clubs, like your Sunderland, your Leeds and your Burnleys, the 3 promoted teams doing so well, I think he might fail to keep them up. And hopefully our new Middlesbrough manager will pass him on the way.
All right then. Well, thank you very much, Graeme. Kieran, thank you so much. And also thanks to Mark. That is it for Beyond the Back Four this week. Make sure you smash that subscribe button, that follow button, wherever you are listening and wherever it is you get your podcast from. We will be back again on Wednesday, as always, looking Beyond the Back Four. If you want to get in touch with us, you can. It's Beyond the Back Four at grv.media. In the meantime, take care of yourselves and enjoy the football.
Thanks for listening to the latest Beyond the Back Four podcast, available on YouTube and all podcast platforms. Subscribe now so you don't miss a single episode.